Wapakanita. In September 3028, the Draconis Combine sent the 3rd Proserpina Hussars and the 12th Galeon Regulars to Wapakoneta, where the Dragoons' Beta and Delta regiments had taken positions on the continent of New Wisconsin, a mountainous area with many forests and lakes. The 9 companies of Dragoons started the campaign with a hit-and-run strategy. Many citizens of Wapakanita had volunteered to act as guides for the Dragoons through the continent's wild terrain. Others risked their lives to carry vital supplies to the mercenaries, and members of the planet's militia would fight alongside them. Though the Dragoons' tactics did succeed in frustrating the Cretan forces and reducing their numbers, of the 9 companies of Dragoons that started the war on Wapakanita, only 6 remained by the beginning of 3029. Having decided the Dragoons must make a stand, Colonels Andrei Shostaskovich and Kathleen Dumont chose the city of Hannibal as being the most defensible. Set high in a mountain pass, Hannibal was snow-covered even in the late summer of January. Because of the slippery, steep slopes and high winds, the only way into or out of the city in the winter was through the massive train tunnels to the valley floor. Machines for the mines near Hannibal would arrive through the rail tunnels, as did the prefabricated buildings that now clung to the narrow mountain gap. The Dragoons attempted to break contact with the enemy and head for Hannibal, but the Hussars and the Galeon Regulars guessed this intention and blocked the Dragoons' path by seizing the town of Bakir. Elements of the 12th Galeon Regulars took the town, which sat astride the Bakir River, a turbulent waterway generally considered too deep and swift to be forded. With no other bridges across the river for several hundred kilometers either way, the Dragoons' only hope was to attack the town in an attempt to rout the Galeon Regulars before they could blow the bridges and before the Proserpina Hussars could catch them. The opening stages of this attack went quite poorly. Attacking across open terrain, the Dragoons were constantly harassed by combined fighters and sniper artillery pieces. Then Mavis Greenhorn, an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of the city tending a small herd of cattle, braved the fighting and reached Colonel Dumont. It turns out she was a veteran of the AFFS who understood why the Dragoons were attacking Bakir, and she told Colonel Dumont about a shallow place downriver where the Dragoon mechs could wade. Colonel Dumont hoisted the woman into her battlemaster's cockpit so she could lead the remnants of Beta and Delta regiments to this crossing. She led them to a peculiar twist of the river about 10 kilometers west of the town. Hidden by massive boulders and rock fields, the river widened and shallowed. The Dragoons crossed and hurried back to Bakir, where they attacked a now startled combined force, who fled across the river, and once all of the Galadons were across, the Dragoons blew up the main bridges across, leaving only 2 that were strong enough for small civilian vehicles, but too flimsy for anything like combined mechs. This gave Beta and Delta regiments a month of breathing space because the Galeon Regulars and the Hussars never did find Mrs. Greenhorn's wading pool. The Dragoons then spent the month evacuating the population of Hannibal and fortifying the city. In late April, the combined forces did appear outside the city. The town and its defences spanned the mountain pass, and so the combined mechs couldn't hope to encircle the town, a fact they discovered when a company of Hussars attempted to slip between the city fortifications and the sheer rock face of Mount Don Reed. Dragoon spotters noticed that the combined forces were under strength, presumably because of the difficulty in climbing the pass. The combined commanders quickly established a secure position and moved their aerospace units to landing strips at the foot of the mountain. The risks of flight were great in this freezing fall weather, especially in the steep mountains. In over a month, however, the weather would permit no flight at all, and it appeared that the combined commanders were now throwing caution to the icy winds. Unable to land at Hannibal, the Dragoon fighters had to use a landing strip near the village of Yaston in the valley below, and though they could still reach Hannibal, they were too far away to respond quickly to any Cretan attacks. Creating additional problems were the companies of infantry and armour left behind by the Galeon Regulars that constantly harassed the Dragoon support personnel when the fighters weren't there to protect them. The Galeon Regulars and Proserpina Hussars would begin round-the-clock bombardment of the city, and within hours the beautiful snow-covered city had become a grey broth of rubble, smoke and slush. The Dragoon mechs survived by taking shelter in the huge underground mining equipment repair and storage facilities and in the rail tunnel network that took the equipment to the mines. These caverns also served as the Dragoons' warehouse and ammo dump. On the 9th of May, after a week of intense bombardment, the mechs of the Hussars and Regulars attacked Hannibal. The bombardment destroyed much of the city, but it also gave the Dragoons natural defensive positions amid the ruined buildings, and using the rubble to lay ambush for the combined troops, the two companies of Wapakanita militia scored many hits against the enemy machines. The Dragoon mechs concentrated fire on enemies' line of advance through the remaining open areas of Hannibal, and the Dragoons halted the Curetans at what had been the wealthy residential district of the city. A sudden, vicious attack stopped the lead combine mechs in their tracks, and then others bunched up behind them, too close to maneuver properly. The point lance, recon mechs sent to survey what lay ahead, and the outrider lancers on either side of the main force to prevent any flanking attacks from surprising the rest, quickly would lose touch with the main force, and were easily picked off by Beta Regiment's 1st Provisional Company. Then the rest of Beta and Delta Regiments attacked the right flank of the combined force, and with no warning from their outriders and too bunched together to respond from the sudden appearance of the enemy, the Curetan mechs stood stupidly, blocking one another's line of fire. The Dragoons had a heyday until the Curetan commander, General Tarsus Bodoli, ordered a general retreat, leaving behind 7 destroyed mechs. Elated, the Dragoons began to block the streets leading into the city with tall piles of debris, and to increase their own mobility inside the city, they cleared other streets and filled craters. They also finished modifying 3 mining equipment trains to carry mechs. The next attack then came by late May on the 21st. After another day of bombardment, then the combine mechs approached, but this time in lance-sized units. Faced with multiple advances on the city, the Dragoons divided their force into 3 groups, called Red, Orange, and White Fire. Beta Regiment's 1st and 2nd Provisional Companies became Red Fire, commanded by Captain Susie Flandry. Orange Fire consisted of the remnants of Beta Regiment and its command lance, plus Delta Regiment's 1st and 2nd Provisional Companies, all under Colonel Shostovskovich. And Red and Orange Fire left their hideaways and confronted the enemy. White Fire, however, Delta Regiment's command lance, and 3rd and 4th Provisional Companies remained in the high-vaulted railway tunnels, loading onto 2 of the modified trains. Lying on an inclined couch made of cast-iron girders, each mech had its feet in stirrups, while its hands had grabbed thick metal cables. Those without hands were strapped in with the cables, and in the early stages of this battle it appeared that the Dragoons would prevail. Red Fire met a lance of Proserpina Hussars in what had been a large peak dedicated to year-round ice sculptures, and the Dragoons seized the initiative, quickly pummeling the outnumbered Hussars. The bombardment turned the beautiful icework into a huge puddle full of ash and pumice from the destroyed prefab buildings, and before the Dragoons could leave the area, more Hussars just kept arriving from 3 directions, pinning them into a corner of the park. Orange Fire took on a heavy lance of mechs from the Galeon Regulars in the ruins of the city's small industrial section. As Orange Fire was destroying the last of the 4 mechs, more Galeon Regulars began to show up, and soon the Dragoons were hiding amid the ruins of the warehouses and factories. Red and Orange Fire then asked for help from White Fire, which sent 1 train in each direction. The journey was not without incident, as the train carrying Colonel Dumont and her warriors to Red Fire's aid had to stop when it entered a narrow part of the tunnel. Colonel Dumont's battlemaster and other heavy mechs were almost knocked off the train when their wide shoulders scraped the walls of the tunnel, the train barely squeezing through, but the delay was 15 minutes. Red Fire didn't have that time to wait, and so Captain Flandry ordered her troops into their underground haven. The Dragoons ran for the entrance, with the Hussars in hot pursuit, and as the main body of Red Fire turned off into a cavern, Captain Raymond Magdaleno and his light mechs led the Hussars deep within the mining equipment tunnels, past points where Dragoons munitions experts had placed explosives. As they penetrated deeper into these tunnels, the Hussars glimpsed fewer and fewer Dragoon mechs, and one by one, the Dragoon mechs were peeling off and circling back toward the entrance. Finally realizing that they'd been tricked, the Hussars turned to leave the tunnel, forcing the Dragoons to act before they were ready. The explosions shook the ceiling supports, sending tons of concrete and debris onto the Hussars and the few Dragoons who didn't make it out in time. 11 mechs of the 3rd Proserpina were crushed, as were 3 Dragoon mechs, including Captain Magdaleno's Phoenix Hawk. The rest of the Hussars broke off contact and retreated. There was no pursuit. The rest of White Fire arrived a kilometre from where Orange Fire was desperately trying to hold their position against the Galeon Regulars. Attacking them from behind, White Fire caught the combined forces completely unprepared. The Galeon Regiment attempted to rally, but it was too disorganised and had to withdraw. After the battles of the 21st of May, a raging snowstorm intervened to halt all military action until it finally lifted by late June. During this tremendous blizzard, both sides had suffered from a lack of food and warm clothing, and because they needed air transport, which was impossible, the Kiritan warriors were particularly hard hit. The Dragoons got some home supply through the underground rail system to the valley, and both sides resorted to simply huddling in their mechs and running them just for the heat. When the storm finally broke in late June, the Combine forces cautiously entered the city, and as the Kiritan mechs walked through the deserted city, messages from the valley confirmed the obvious. The Dragoons had left through the rail system that took them down the mountain to Yaston, and there they'd loaded onto their dropships and left Wapakanita just 2 days before the storm broke. The last train carrying the Dragoon mechs down from Hannibal had crashed, killing 5 mech warriors and the crew of civilian volunteers operating it. 10 mechs were so badly mangled they were abandoned, and only 4 companies of mechs from Beta and Delta regiments left Wapakanita for the planet of Crossing.